Watch Day 9, or as she titled it, Why Didn't I Work at a Pet Store Instead? Her voice sounds lighthearted in that last entry. Calm, unbothered, except for a note of boredom when she jokes about teaching crabs to play chess. That was the final message in the audio log of Dr. Ari Storn. 48 hours later, a rescue team would open her underwater laboratory and find it in perfect order, all life support systems running, but no sign of her. On the main viewport, they would see something strange, a living pattern of microorganisms forming her face. On camera, the portrait blinks. From the depths below, the divers would swear they heard a haunting sound. Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade, played by an orchestra of shells echoing in the dark water. And then they would find her body, hundreds of meters beneath the lab, with full oxygen tanks and traces of translucent slime on her suit, slime that smelled of whiskey and sea salt. Dr. Ari Storn was a brilliant marine biologist and an impossible person. She lived by one rule. If you can't explain your theory in 3 PowerPoint slides, it's either a bad grant or a great hallucination. Her audio diary, recorded at Station Neptune, was called 20 Meters Under the Madness. It was filled with dry humor and scientific cynicism. This morning, she says, Stephen the cleaner shrimp tried to give me a manicure again. I told him my insurance doesn't cover cross-species beauty treatments. Ari had no patience for mysticism. She trusted data, not dreams. But that same obsession with data is what made her notice, what no one else did. Neptune was both her kingdom and her prison. A small capsule resting 20 meters beneath the surface in Biscayne National Park, Florida. A metal cylinder packed with equipment, one large window overlooking a coral reef. Life there was monotonous. The constant hum of air systems, artificial light, and beyond the glass, a silent, endless blue world. Storn spent 2 weeks at a time completely alone, studying coral diseases, day after day, listening to the sea whisper in frequencies only she could hear. For Ari, it was all routine. She knew every fish by face, named a few of the larger groupers, and carried ongoing arguments with a particularly arrogant barracuda that kept trying to bite one of her sensors. This was her office, boring, predictable, and absolutely safe. At least, that's what she thought. It began on the 7th day of the mission. When she woke up, she saw it, a thin film on the viewport, barely visible, like a layer of algae. Perfect, she muttered into her recorder. Day 7, the reef decided to take up graffiti. Now I'll spend half a day cleaning instead of doing real science. Contamination on the glass irritated her. It ruined spectral readings. So she snapped a few macro shots, trying to identify the species. Her note in the log was sarcastic as always. This isn't algae growth, it's choreography or graffiti, or maybe the reef's version of a very slow TikTok. She didn't know yet that this little joke of nature was a message. By evening, the film had thickened. It started forming a pattern. That was odd. Algae don't do that. Curious, Ari linked her external microscope to the main camera and projected the image on the big screen. What she saw stopped her cold. The pattern was made of bioluminescent organisms, arranged with mathematical precision, like someone was conducting them. She zoomed out. The computer stitched together hundreds of frames and built a single image. It was a face, a woman's face, her own face, drawn on the glass by living, glowing bacteria. Her first reaction was laughter, thin, nervous laughter that cracked in her throat. Pareidolia, she said into the recorder. Classic case. The brain finds familiar shapes in chaos. Apparently, my brain has a God complex. She decided to document the phenomenon. Set up the camera on a tripod, switched to time-lapse mode, let it record through the night. Then she took a mild sleeping pill and tried to rest. The next morning, while reviewing the footage, she nearly dropped her coffee. The growth looked normal at first, smooth, gradual. but for a single frame, just a fraction of a second. The eye in the portrait closed. In the next frame, it opened again. It blinked. Cold fear spread through her. She rewound the footage again and again, trying to convince herself she imagined it. Then came the sound, a low, vibrating tone from the hydrophone outside. Not engine noise, not whale song. Music, a melody, played on strange, resonant instruments, as if someone had turned giant conch shells and whale vertebrae into a cathedral organ. The sound was deep, melancholic, and breathtakingly beautiful. Ari froze, listening. Her rational mind raced for answers. Acoustic anomaly, resonant currents, some submarine signal. But another part of her, the one she never trusted, knew the truth. It wasn't possible. The music sounded as if it were being played right outside her window. On the surface ship, Triton 3T, a young technician named Leo, a former DJ from New Orleans, almost choked on his sandwich. "Captain," he said, pulling off his headphones, "we've got a concert down here." Captain Hendricks, a hard-faced sailor with 30 years at sea, walked over to the console. From the speakers came that same strange, echoing music. Leo flipped a few switches, feeding the signal into the spectrum analyzer. "It's jazz, Cap. Old-school jazz, but underwater," he chuckled nervously. "Either a cruise liner from 1902 just resurfaced, or we've discovered the deepest jazz club in the universe." Hendricks didn't laugh. He grabbed the mic. "Neptune, this is Triton. Ari, report your status. We're picking up interference." Ari didn't respond. She was frozen, listening. And then she recognized the melody. Moonlight Serenade, Glenn Miller, 1940s. Her grandfather's favorite song. But how could it be playing here, 20 meters under the ocean, performed on some phantom underwater organ? She activated the recorder. Her voice trembled, all sarcasm gone. "Entry, I'm not sure which one. The hydrophone records music, real music. Moonlight Serenade, source unknown. I think I'm losing my mind. The rule of 3 slides doesn't work anymore. This is definitely a hallucination, except I'm not the only one hearing it." On Triton, Leo, driven by instinct, typed into the Marine Archive search bar, "Missing ships, Glenn Miller, orchestra." The result popped up in seconds. Cargo ship SS Mariposa, departed New Orleans for Havana, 1943. A small jazz band aboard to entertain the crew. The ship sailed straight into a hurricane, vanished without a trace. The rescue mission found nothing. Only one final message was ever received. Fragmented, broken. "The storm is terrible, but the music plays. The music plays, but there is no audience." The last recorded coordinates of the Mariposa were barely 10 nautical miles from where the Neptune lab now stood. Ari hadn't slept for 36 hours. She sat in the dim blue glow of the blinking portrait on the glass, listening to the endless moonlight serenade. The coffee was gone. Her scientist's mind clawed for logic. Mass hallucination? Maybe a gas leak from the seabed? The radio burst to life, the sharp, irritated voice of Captain Hendricks. "Neptune, respond immediately. Status report. That's an order." Ari swayed as she moved toward the console. She looked up at her glowing portrait, at the spectral jazz vibrating across the sonar screen, and laughed. She pressed the transmit button. "Repeating for the record, this is not the song of a siren, and I'm not falling in love with a squid. But if anyone up there can explain a bioluminescent QR code on coral, call me. Or don't. Stuck down here in an underwater prison without Wi-Fi. Over and out." The moment her laughter stopped, every indicator on the Triton's console tied to Neptune Station went dark. Camera feeds, air composition data, pressure sensors, audio link, all of it gone. Instantaneously. The main screen flickered once, then blacked out completely, leaving only a single red line of text. Signal lost. Captain Hendricks stared at the display for several seconds. His face froze, expressionless. He didn't try to call again. He turned to his crew. "Dive team, ready position 1. We're going down." The ship fell silent, that sharp professional kind of silence that replaces fear. The joking stopped. It was now a rescue mission. 4 divers descended into the deep. The haunting jazz they had still been hearing through the Triton's hull cut off, mid-note, and the sea went deafeningly quiet. "Report," came Hendricks' voice through the intercom. "Descending," replied the team leader. "Visibility is good, no anomalies." But even as he spoke, his skin prickled beneath the dive suit. The water around Neptune looked wrong, too clear. The reef below, too bright, like a painted backdrop under artificial light. The station itself appeared intact, except for one thing. The bioluminescent portrait on the viewport was still there, only now it pulsed, gently, rhythmically, like a slow-beating heart. The team breached the emergency hatch and entered. Inside, everything was immaculate. Life support systems were running normally. No signs of struggle, no chaos. On the main desk, Ari's laptop stood open. The fractal analysis program still active, its frame frozen. Next to it, her audio recorder. The commander pressed play. "Day 8, came her cheerful voice through the static. "My underwater portraitist decided to go impressionist. The reef continues its very slow tick-tock. If it starts doing trends, I'm demanding royalties." Then silence. No screams, no panic, just the voice of a scientist standing face to face with the impossible. And then, nothing. No Ari. The search expanded. Boats and divers combed the reef mile by mile. Nothing. On the 3rd day, another research vessel, 30 miles to the south, reported something strange. Their sonar had detected an object at a depth of 300 meters, far below what any diver could reach without specialized equipment. They sent down a remotely operated vehicle. The camera flickered on, revealing a body in a wetsuit suspended mid-water. Not sinking, not rising, just drifting there, gently swaying in the slow deep-sea current. It was Ari. Her mask was still sealed, regulator in place. She looked peaceful, as if she'd simply fallen asleep during a dive. The coroner's report was brief and absurd. Cause of death, decompression sickness caused by rapid ascent. A tidy explanation, neat enough to mark it an accident, a moment of panic. But the facts refused to cooperate. First, her tanks were almost full. She hadn't been losing air. She hadn't been rushing anywhere. Second, they found her at a depth so great that any rapid ascent from there would have crushed her long before reaching the surface. And then, the strangest line in the report, filed under unknown substance. Traces of a clear, viscous residue on her wetsuit. It evaporated the moment it touched air, leaving one unmistakable scent: aged whiskey and sea salt. While the official investigation stalled, Leo kept digging. He cross-checked the story of the SS Mariposa with old park archives and found something. 1979, almost the same location. Another marine biologist. Vanished. His underwater camera had been recovered. Most of the footage, ordinary scenes of fish and coral, but one overexposed frame showed something else, the outline of a shipwreck. The final entry in his logbook read, "Strange acoustic interference. Sounds like music, but that's impossible." The pattern was clear.
Every few decades, this place began to play its music and claimed whoever was bold enough to listen. To assist the inquiry, Dr. Ramirez arrived aboard the Triton, Ari's colleague and, by all accounts, her only real friend. He was her opposite, quiet, measured, precise. He listened to her audio logs, and unlike the investigators, he understood the humor. "She wasn't panicking," he told Captain Hendricks. "She was mocking it. That's how she handled the absurd." The bioluminescent QR code, she was still searching for reason, even when she knew there wasn't one. The decompression story is nonsense. Ari was too experienced a diver for that mistake. The ocean didn't kill her. She went to meet it. Later, sitting with the lead detective, Ramirez shook his head at every proposed theory. "Suicide?" the detective asked.
Ari loved life more than anyone, he said, and she'd never have left her favorite grouper, Ferdinand, unattended. The detective wrote something in the file, snapped it shut, and looked up. Accident, he said quietly. Ramirez said nothing, but somewhere beyond the hull of the ship, he thought he heard a faint rhythmic echo like music drifting through water. At 300 meters, with full oxygen tanks and not a single injury, murder was impossible. By whom then? A ghost jazz band? The only potential suspect, the barracuda she used to argue with, had a solid alibi. Every rational explanation collapsed. There was only one thing left: to admit that something had happened for which humanity had no protocol, no terminology. It wasn't an accident. It was, as Ari once joked herself, an evacuation under someone else's protocol. The case was quietly suspended. Neptune Lab was sealed and left to rest. But Ramirez couldn't let it go. He was convinced that Ari hadn't simply died. She had made contact. A month later, under the pretext of recalibrating the equipment, he descended alone in a small bathyscaphe toward Neptune's silent shell. The glowing portrait on the viewport had faded, but it was still there. With the manipulator arm, Ramirez carefully placed a waterproof speaker beside the hatch. He pressed a button on his console, and a slow, clear melody flowed through the water. Moonlight Serenade. "This is for you, Ari," he whispered. "Hope the reception's good where you are." A week later, a maintenance drone sent new images from the site. The speaker was gone, but in its place, on the coral sand, something new had appeared, a perfectly circular object, about a meter wide. It looked organic, yet unnervingly precise. Black, layered with fine concentric grooves radiating outward from its center. It resembled a massive vinyl record, grown by the sea itself. Biologists classified it as a new, unknown species of coral, but the real discovery came by accident. When the current shifted, passing through the porous ridges of its structure, the water began to vibrate, producing a faint, sustained tone, deep, melancholy, and unmistakably similar to a note played on a saxophone. The reef hadn't just taken the music, it had learned to play it. Later, Ramirez, using his admin credentials, gained access to Ari's personal backup server. Hidden deep among encrypted folders, he found one final audio file, private, unsent. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. "I understand now. It isn't algae or music, it's language, mathematics. They communicate through fractals and harmonies. They've been here for millennia. They're a symbiosis, and they're calling. This isn't death, it's a transfer to a new assignment." Apparently, they needed a marine biologist with a good sense of humor, and they say their band is incredible. Half a year later, the story had faded into rumor, a diver's ghost tale told over drinks. Dr. Ramirez appeared in a documentary about the mysteries of the ocean. He spoke about the official version: decompression, a tragic accident, human error. But at the end, he looked straight into the camera and smiled faintly. "You know," he said, "I just hope that if Ari's out there in her underwater jazz club, the message gets through. Tell her her research grant's been renewed. She'll just have to file her next report from the afterlife." A year later, the deep-sea explorer Odyssey descended into an uncharted canyon hundreds of miles off the Florida coast, 2,000 meters down. Absolute darkness, pressure that could crush steel. And then, a sound. The external hydrophone picked up a signal. The operator turned up the volume. Out of the silence, from the crushing depths, came the faint, pure melody of a jazz orchestra playing Moonlight Serenade. The camera turned slowly. The floodlight caught only drifting dust, tiny organisms floating in the dark, glimmering like dust motes in a moonbeam. The music played on, and then the screen faded to black. Thank you for watching.